Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Melody with Design by Melody, and I have another layout in my family history album for you. So I worked in this same album on Monday using a Stampin' Up kit that I had in my stash. Well, today I'm just using all the different scraps that I have sitting on my desk. I had a lot of products from different projects that I've been working on laying here on my desk. So I thought it was time to go ahead and use some of those before I put them up and just see what I can create. Now, this journaling was actually printed twice. I had printed it and used it on a different layout before, but I wanted to include it in my family history album as well. I put it in my in a different album, but I wanted to include it here in this family history album as well. Plus, I had different photos that I was including with the journaling. So this journaling, you can definitely read it if you want. I will have still photos on my blog so you can see it a little bit easier. But this journaling is just different stories that my aunt told me. So my dad died a couple years ago, and my aunt and I spent some time, a couple times actually talking on the phone, and she was giving me some stories. So I am obviously the memory keeper in the family. I love to write down family stories. I love to scrapbook and document and I enjoy the process. Plus, I just think it's fun to be able to have all these stories down so other family members can see them later, especially like my children and my nephews, so they can read the stories about their grandfather when they get older. I don't know, Kaylin will remember my dad, but I don't know if the other nephews will. Well, there was only one other one that was alive when my dad was alive, and he was much younger. So to be able to have these stories down is really important to me because my dad won't be able to tell them those stories himself. Now I'm using my Brother P-Touch labeler to just print out some little labels with the names of who are in these pictures. So it's my dad, his brother, and his sister. And you'll actually see I end up printing them in the order that they're appearing in the photos. I end up messing up one and having to go back and print it later, which I had just realized. So I'm going back and printing that. And this is just a way for me to be able to document who is in these photos, especially now I obviously know my aunt and my uncle and my dad, but there is a picture of my dad's grandfather, so my great-grandfather that I never met. He had died before I was born, and my dad always talked about him. So when I found a picture of him, I thought it was really kind of a fun picture to include on this particular layout because the journaling references him. I just remember all the stories my dad told me whenever he was younger about my grandfather, or his grandfather, so my great-grandfather. So there's a couple different pictures. There's the picture at the top of my dad and his brother and sister. My dad's the youngest when they were younger. My dad's probably 4 or 5 in that picture. Then there's a picture of his grandfather, which is my great-grandfather, and he always called him Granddaddy George. And then at the bottom, there's the picture of my dad, my uncle, and my aunt. My dad, I believe, was in high school here or maybe in college, but there's a picture of them kind of just hanging out and chilling. And this was, I think this was before my dad... No, I take that back. He's got a wedding ring on, so this probably would have been right after college. I had to check that picture just to be sure. That was probably right after college. So I thought including the 3 of these photos was actually a really good way to include some photos that the journaling references, but I don't have specific photos that go along with the specific stories that I have journaled here. So these stories tell a little bit. I think there's 4 or 5 different little snippets of stories that I just have just kind of an overview of. But it talks about the pets that they had. It talked about the things that they like to do, like building tree houses and creating paths in the woods with their bikes, going to the corner store for their great-granddaddy, or for their Granddaddy George, my great-grandfather. So by having these different photos, you can kind of get a glimpse of my dad's childhood, but I don't have the specific photos that go along with the story, so it just kind of works out. Now I'm going through this giant pile of scraps just to see what additional papers I want to include. So the left side is obviously very journal heavy, but I don't want to just put the little squares with all the journaling on there and be done with it. I obviously want to make it a little bit more decorative. So I just layer a couple different pieces of pattern paper behind there, and I did have some triangular shaped printed. They're pattern paper, and they were on a perforated piece of of pattern paper, and so I pulled a couple of those off. One's kind of a darker pink, and then one of them is a gray kind of diagonal stripe, and I'm going to put them on the right side of this right page. It kind of creates a bit of a border on the side, and it brings it a little bit more color, but it also gives me a grounding point for all three of these photos just to be stacked right here. The background page that I have picked for this particular layout is just a two pages in the middle of this smash book, and it has a kind of a paisley print sort of on that cream part, and then it has the teal paper, of course, and then it just has a bike at the bottom that says "You and Me," and that's not in particular for anything, but these are stories of my dad's childhood, so I thought it was fitting. It worked really well, and one of the stories does reference them riding their bikes, so you can kind of see the basis for the background here. And then my journaling is just going to be matted on these little pieces of pattern paper that coordinate with the colors that are already on this page, especially since I added those triangular shapes to the right. And I went ahead and fixed my journaling. So the top one says Becky, Daddy, and Larry. The middle one says Granddaddy George. And then the bottom one says Daddy, Becky, and Larry because they're in separate orders. Just getting everything glued down here, and then we're going to kind of work. I was a little bit at a loss of what else to include, but the labels weren't really standing out, so I decided to go ahead and mat those on something. So I'm going to put it on that darker teal paper that's right there, and I'm just literally going through the entire pile of scraps to see if anything jumps out at me. I like to keep scraps on my desk, so I have it's actually a little divided tray from IKEA that I got a couple years ago, and I just keep a lot of scraps in this bin, and I pull from them. If I'm doing a layout using a kit and I need just something more that's not in the kit, I'll pull from this scrap bin. And eventually, as the scrap bin kind of gets used up, I will then put more scraps in it. I have a larger scrap box that I keep on a shelf, but I don't keep it right near my scrap desk because it's too hard to pull from the giant box of scraps. But what I do utilize it for is when I am kind of running low on this scrap little tray that sits on my desk, then I'll kind of refill it. I also throw things in here as I'm scrapbooking with a kit, and at the end of the kit I just throw all the scraps in there if it's really not a kit that I want to keep together. I try to use kits if I order a kit, like a monthly subscription kit, then I try to utilize that kit as soon as I get it. I try not to keep things in my stash for too long. But when I do see things on sale, I will grab them, like clearance. Like if kits go on clearance for some particular scrapbooking company that I really like, then I'll buy 4 or 5 kits at one time. And then I'll just keep those in my stash and use them when I get around to it. I'm using these October Afternoon Mini Market alphas. They're just tile alphas, and they're in a darker teal with a slightly cream print. It's not a bright white, but since I've got a lot of the white and the cream going on this page, I thought it was a good font to use because a lot of times I actually shy away from these alpha stickers. I actually really like the alpha stickers, but I shy away from them because I much more frequently scrapbook with a bright white versus any kind of cream. But this particular smash book album has been really nice because I have been mixing cream and white together because a lot of the layouts, a lot of the pages that are already printed in this album actually have cream on them. But I'm doing a lot of journaling printed from my computer, which is a bright white that I print on. So I've been mixing it pretty well throughout this album. So this really bothers me because I put down my title crooked. That like really bothers me. I have a really big problem with that. And I could just use my T-square ruler and have it totally lined up because that would make perfect sense. But why would I do that? Because again, that makes sense. So why would I choose to do something that actually makes sense? But I have to go through and pull up every single one of these letters and re-straighten it because it was like so crooked, and it really bothered me, especially because it was kind of going in the conjunction of those two squares with the journaling. It was super noticeable that it was crooked. This is a chipboard sheet that I have in my scraps. It is from, I think it's an Allie Edwards kit. So I just pulled out the pink one that's a circle and it said this. And then I'm just really going all out with the embellishments. I'm pulling from all random things. I have this large heart sticky note that I'm going to layer behind the journaling at the top. I have some stamping that I'm going to do. I'm using these random phrase stickers from Gossamer Blue. I have some heart stickers that we're going to glue down here in a second. I trimmed out that kind of vintage looking camera at the bottom, which I thought was super fitting for this layout because again, we're talking about some stories from like the 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s are pretty much where these stories are from. So I thought having the vintage camera was kind of fitting. Then I trimmed out a little triangle from a label that said details. It's a super small detail to have on this layout, but it's right there at the very top of the journaling. It kind of like starts the journaling. I thought it worked really well right there. And then this little chipboard circle, and I'm going to continue to go through my scrap bin. So I could have stopped right here and been totally done with this layout, but I kept feeling like I needed to add a little bit more. So I ended up finding a couple sticker sheets that are in my stash, as well as pulling out some of the stamps. I don't utilize my stamps near enough. I should utilize stamps so much more because it's one of those things that you can use to create embellishments with that never run out. Like my stamps aren't going to run out unless I mess one up, which, you know, is possible, but it's not like it runs out. You can use these over and over and over again. And since I had already used that circular element that said this on the bottom right, I wanted to have another circular element somewhere else on the page. So I stamp out this and it says 100% authentic magic moment right here. And I'm going to put that right on top of where the bottom of that Post-it note heart is. It's a very large Post-it note heart and it's very bold on this page. So I wanted to layer a couple of things over it just to make it a little less bold looking and less out of place because it was very large. But I did like the way that it worked as far as layering under my journaling. I'm just going to trim this out using my Cutter Bee Precision Scissors. If you don't have these scissors, they're perfect for fussy cutting, and I really like to fussy cut. Even as you saw, I just cut a little bit of that white border that was around the Post-it note heart. It was a little bit too bold of a border, so I used my precision scissors to cut that out. So if you don't have these precision scissors, I highly recommend it. Now, I haven't mentioned this, but I am just using this little scrap piece of vellum. That was in the front of my Webster's Pages planner I got a couple years ago, and I'm such a hoarder slash, I don't know what you want to call it. I can't get rid of things. So like I saw this piece of vellum with the gold hello and I was like, oh, that'd be a perfect scrapbooking product. I like element to include on a page, and I never used it, but I kept it in my stash. So I'm finally just cutting it apart and using it as vellum pieces. Now each of the photos is mounted. I didn't even mention that. I trimmed each of the photos down. And they're each matted on white cardstock, and then I matted each of those on a small piece of vellum. So you can't really see it right now in the film, but you can see it in the still photos that you will see here at the end of the layout. Now, one of the last things I'm doing is going through a sticker sheet that I have from the Reset Girl. It was a collection. It's a scrapbook kit that I purchased a couple years ago, and I still have a few small scraps left from that kit. And one of them, or I guess there's like 3 sticker sheets here, all from that same kit. And I've just been using the stickers on a couple different layouts just throughout time because these sticker sheets, I really wish they were still available. They had a lot of really cute elements on them. So I'm using some of the birds here. There's a bird feeder that I'm putting on the right, kind of like coming off the edge of the page. And then also I'm using a couple of the little banner pieces. And then there was this circle pattern paper one that was just a sticker as well, and I put that on a piece of vellum and cut around it, and then I'm putting it right behind that magic stamped image. Now I also had this little square. It was like a pretty bold black square with a sketchy looking camera on it. I just liked it. It didn't necessarily need to go on this page because I already had a camera on the page, and this is a pretty bold black element. I don't have a lot of bold black elements on this page, but it did work and I thought it was cute, so I just really wanted to include it. Some of these stickers are a little bit older, so I'm having to reinforce them with a little bit of extra glue. Since I'm not really doing scrapbooking in page protectors anymore, when I do my older layouts from older albums, which I am still working on, by the way, I do layouts that are going to be in page protectors, but like this album and my 2020 album and my traveler's notebooks and my mini albums, none of those have page protectors. So I have to be very careful about making sure everything is adhered down properly. If I think it's going to move around or possibly fall off, I make sure to reinforce it either with a glue runner or a tape runner or some liquid glue, or like the Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue is a perfect glue to use to reinforce alpha letters or chipboard pieces or whatever. So this is the completed layout. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I love working in this family history album. I think it's fun. I think it's different than traditional scrapbooking, and I just think it's really a great project to have. And it's a lot easier to pass this little book around than it is to pass a big giant 12 by 12 scrapbook album around. So that's kind of why I've gone a little bit more in this direction with some of my scrapbooking. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. At the very end of the video here, I'm going to have our last video, which was Monday. It's another page in this family history album. So if you missed it, click on that video so you can watch it here. And I also have a subscribe button. If you are not already subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified anytime that I have new layouts out for you or new videos out for you. I try to post at least 3 times a week, so I have a lot of content to share with you. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll be back soon. Bye!